Good morning, community of friends and seekers. This virtual service is brought to you from First Universalist Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. My name is Reverend Karen Hutt, and I'm an adjunct minister here at the church. A few Zoom tips as we settle in. We suggest you open your chat box now and keep it open during worship. It's probably on the bottom left of your screen. Once you do that, let us know you're here by typing a greeting in the chat box. Make sure you have your chat set to go to all panelists and participants. You got it? Great. So everyone can see your chat messages. We want to know who you are. Participant video and audio are automatically disabled for worship. So no need to worry about us all looking at you in your Harry Potter pajamas. This means that no one can see you, so relax and kick back. If you have trouble with the audio on your computer, you can always mute your computer sound, and then you can dial in on your phone, old school, and listen to the audio while you watch the video on your computer. If you aren't receiving emails from the church, let us know. We want to know you and be connected, especially during this time when so much is changing day to day. So settle in. We're going to begin in 5 minutes. Get that second cup of coffee. And now others on the worship team want to say hello. Hey there, Ruth.
Great to see you, Karen. Hello, and hello everyone at First Universalist. I see so many people coming in on the chat box, and it's wonderful. It is great to be in this company of people. And there's Lauren outside.
Here I am outside because, Wi-Fi isn't always reliable. So, outside, but thank goodness it's not raining. So here I am in my backyard.
Hey.
And you know what? I'm super excited to be coming to you from church instead of my bedroom this week. So I'm hanging out in Ruth's office.
Yay!
Really happy to be here. And I see people coming in from all over, from Michigan, California, Iowa, Massachusetts.
Wow.
And of course, Minneapolis.
Yay. Welcome, everybody. I want to ask, do you guys remember, this old hand game? It goes something like this. Here is the church. Here is the steeple. Look inside, and here are the people. Yes, we are the people, and nothing can get in the way of the relationships that we, the people, create. We, the people, are the spirit of love and hope that we need right now. We, the people, that create the hope that we give to ourselves and one another. We, the people, are the beings that evolve and grow through unexpected hardships and grace-filled joys. We welcome you with virtual hugs and Zoom-lit smiles. We affirm you, and we will protect each other with the light of our smiles and our frowns. We, the people of First Universalist, listen deeply where love is calling us next, because that's who we are. We, the people of First Universalist, have been cultivating bravery and humility and compassion in the service of justice for over 150 years, because that is who we are. We do all of this as a faith community committed to racial, social, economic, and environmental justice. We welcome new people, people seeking a new way to be in community, and we invite you to give a shout out by sharing your name, where you're from, and what brought you to church this morning in the chat box. You could have rolled over and just slept for another hour, but you're up and in your right mind watching this service. So why are you here? Tell us about it. We are here for you and encourage you to reach out to each other, our staff, and our ministers during this unprecedented and unsettling time in our global history. There are lots of ways for us to remain connected and to connect to new people. After worship today, I'll be hosting the coffee hour time. So go get your second cup and go to our website in the Liberal to see all that is going on this week. Today, coffee hour again right after worship. Today also the senior high youth group will be meeting at 11:15. Young family story time with Seth at 12:30. That is a blast. So make sure your kids get in front of the screen to see yet Seth do his thing. The Black Indigenous People of Color Youth Group will be meeting today at 12:30, and we ask folks to come on and join in. Please use the new Zoom link sent to your email this morning to attend today's children, youth, and family events. Zoom has, as you may have heard about Zoom bombing, Zoom has updated security and your old links may not work. So make sure you get the most updated links. So check out the Liberal, our online newsletter. Those of you who may be from other places who aren't familiar with it, go to our website and they'll link you to the Liberal and see what's going on throughout the week, including a Wednesday night service at 7 p.m. There are also some new groups gathering this week. Young adults will be gathering, healthcare workers, and that means everyone who works in healthcare, whether you're a secretary, a doctor, a nurse, a social worker, a transport person, a dietitian, or a security guard, anyone who works in any medical setting, clinics, hospitals, and long-term care. I'll be facilitating that group and we look forward to seeing you because you have some particular needs and we want to make sure that we are tending to those particularly. Wednesday morning too, this is going to be a gas. It's going to be a multi-generational sing-along. Wake up Wednesday and sing along. And that's for people that aren't in the choir, so, as well as those who are in the choir. So those of you who want to really belt it out, come on. There are also the young adults will be meeting this week, and we want to make sure that they connect to the church. So at this time, we want to ask you that you light a chalice if you have one, or a candle if you have one, or just go over to the gas stove and turn it on. But bring a little bit of First Universalist sunshine into your space this morning. Now, our chalice lighters, Georgia and Rosanna, will lead us in our affirmation.
Please join me in the words for the lighting of our chalice. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Lauren Wyeth. I'm the Director of Children, Youth, and Family Ministries at First Universalist, and I am practicing flexibility this morning and every day. I have a story for you this morning, and as I heard it told, once there was a woman who lived in a small village. Through the years, she had been generous and compassionate with her neighbors, and she had many friends. The people of the village often came to her for a bit of advice, knowing she could always be counted on to listen and sometimes to share a bit of hard-earned wisdom. Now, this woman had one daughter, and they loved each other dearly. But the daughter was really nothing like her mother. The villagers often wondered how someone so helpful could have a child who did so little. The girl preferred to sleep late into the day and spend her few waking hours with her nose in a book. So most of her life was spent in bed or sprawled on the couch. Rarely did she get up to cook a meal or even change her clothes. She just wanted to eat peanut butter crackers and stay in her PJs. Well, over time, the daughter grew until she was nearly a grown-up. The mother became an old woman, and she began to worry about her daughter's future. She wondered how the daughter might learn to live a good and meaningful life. So one day, she called her daughter out into the garden where she was watering the peanut plants, and she said, "Beloved daughter, you are no longer a child. I want to help you find your way, find a path to a good and meaningful life. I want you to find your purpose." She handed the girl a bag, and inside were 4 pairs of clothes, one for each season. and a sleeve of saltines and a small bag of peanuts, a little bit of money, and a map. The mother said to her daughter, "I want you to find this priceless treasure. I've marked its location with an X on this map." Now, the daughter loved this idea. The very next morning, she eagerly set out. She knew she was going to have to swim across rivers and climb really tall mountains and make her way through some deep forests, but she was determined to find that treasure. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Along the way, the girl met many people. Some gave her food. Some offered her a place to stay. She ran into robbers who tried to take everything she had. She sprained an ankle trying to climb over some slippery rocks one icy day. Many people pointed her in the right direction when she lost her way. As she hurried along, the seasons changed and the landscapes changed. Finally, after nearly a year, she arrived at the edge of a high cliff. The map showed the treasure buried under an ancient tree there. She dug for a day, searching and searching, and again the next day and the next. Finally, she had to admit the treasure wasn't there. She was disappointed and angry as she turned back toward home. How could her mother have sent her on this wild goose chase? Well, on the way back, she saw the same changing landscapes and seasons. But this time, she stopped to enjoy the blooming flowers and the booming thunder. On particularly foul weather days, she would find a place to stay and shelter for a while. She learned to gather nuts and fruits and to protect herself from snake bites and stinging nettles. She met the same people who had helped her. This time she stayed with them for a few days, mending clothes or chopping wood to help repay their kindnesses to her. She realized how generous they had been to help a stranger who had nothing to give in return. 2 years after she'd left, she finally returned home. She hugged her mother so hard. Her mother pulled back and looked in her daughter's face. And she said, "How was your journey?" "Ah, it was awesome," the daughter said. She noticed that her anger and her disappointment had just melted away. But she said, "Mother, forgive me, I wasn't able to find the treasure." "Oh, there was never a treasure buried under that tree," her mother said gently. "I'll tell you why in a moment. But first, tell me about your journey to the cliff. Did you enjoy it?" No, not really," the daughter admitted. "I was in such a hurry and I was so afraid someone would get to the treasure before I did. But I did enjoy the journey home. I met so many friends and I learned so many new things. Now I can sew and I can garden and I can chop wood and I can sing and I can mend clothes. I learned so much and there is so much more to learn. Mom, I'm so glad that I took this journey. I got back and I have completely forgotten the pain of not finding that treasure." "Well, I knew you would," said the wise old woman. The promise of treasure is often what draws us out into the world, but the treasure is not really what makes life meaningful. The purpose of life is to experience it all, my dear. The sun, the storms, health and loss, betrayal, and everywhere you go, you find love. You have let this all shape you into a fine young person, and you still have joy sheltered in your heart. And indeed, she had. Now, through the seasons of our lives, I hope every one of us is equipped with as much love as that young woman took with her on her journey, and that we encounter as much generosity as she did. May your heart shelter joy. May you use your hands to help. May your life make you wise. Fellow wanderers, fellow lovers of leaving, now we're going to sing a song with our beloved Franco and Reverend Ruth. Won't you join us?
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come.
Hello, everyone. It was so good to sing together, even if it's virtually. So friends, I invite you to take this time to ground yourself in a place and time of prayer and mindfulness. And so I ask that you place your feet on the floor or find a comfortable way to sit. Take a breath in and let it out. Maybe you might want to massage one shoulder and just wake it up. Wake up your shoulders and then move to the other side. Oh, and wake up that shoulder. And then find a moment of stillness. Just feel the aliveness of your body. Close your eyes if that feels comfortable, or soften your gaze. And now let's just practice, as Reverend Jen has taught us, a deep breath in and a slow breath out. A full breath in and a slow breath out. One more. And now let us enter this time of sacred silence in which we are one. Spirit of life and love, here we are. We are tangled in worries, stressed out from caring, short-tempered, missing our friends, adjusting to thresholds and milestones, losses and tragedies that are noted on a screen instead of held in the physical embrace of community. Here we are, angry at the state of things, wondering how we're going to make ends meet, working too many hours or working too few. We are bored, we're exhausted, we're grieving, we're longing for touch, longing for connections that are face to face, hand to hand, heart to heart. Like little ones in the back seat of the car, we ask, how long? How much further? When can we get out? Spirit of life and love, in these times of trial and revelation, in this marathon of things falling apart and coming back together in new and surprising ways, bring to mind the wise words of the Persian mystic Hafiz. Now is the time to know that all that we do is sacred. Now, why not consider a lasting truce with yourself and the universe? Now it is the time to understand that all your ideas of right and wrong were just a child's training wheels to be laid aside when you finally live with veracity and love. Why do we still throw sticks at our heart? What is it in the sweet voice inside that incites you to fear? Now is the time for the world to know that every thought and action is sacred. This is the time to deeply compute the impossibility that there is anything but grace, spirit of life and love. Now is the time. Now is the time for us to know that everything we do is sacred. Today, as we share the sorrows and our joys, let us hold the words of Hafiz in our hearts in gentle and astonishing recognition that now is the time to know that everything we do is sacred. Let us share all that we are holding now. Perhaps lift a prayer for ourselves, knowing that even in the darkness, stars are shining. So I invite you to list your sorrows and concerns in the chat box if you wish, or to simply hold them in the silent sanctuary of your heart. Today, we also hold Kim Meyer and her family as she mourns the death of her beloved wife, Susan Jack, who died this past Tuesday. And we hold dear Dale Shui and his family as they grieve the death of his beloved wife, Kay Shui, who also died this past Tuesday. Small family services will be held in the coming weeks with plans for a larger communal memorial in the future. Today, to acknowledge the heartache and the loss that our dear friends are bearing in these unprecedented times, and to hold the light in each human heart as sacred. We light a candle for Susan Jack. We light a candle for Kay Shui. May their light and love live on through us all. Dear ones, these are times of mourning and endurance. And as Lauren's story so beautifully told, these are also times of surprising grace, that which breaks through and transforms our lives in hope and meaning. And so I invite you to share joys, surprises, pieces of grace that you're coming across in the chat box. May the grip of addiction loosen. May the weight of oppression lighten. May grief be shared and joy break through. And may love make every suffering bearable for us all. May it be so, dear ones. Amen. And now I invite you to sing with me the Spirit of Life. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots, hold me close. Wings, set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Friends, it is so good to be together. I find that I look forward to this time all week long. A chance to be real with one another, to share our sorrows and our joys, to carry it all together. Here we are. So this past week, a friend of mine sent me an article from the New York Times that has been absolutely sustaining me. So in this article, it tells the story of two women, Naomi and Eva, ages 101 and 95. Between them, they have survived all kinds of things. For instance, the 1918 flu, the Depression, the Holocaust, being separated from their families during the Holocaust, immigration that maybe they did not want, the death of a sibling to what would have been just a regular old ear infection these days, polio, anti-Semitism, homophobia, sexism. The two of them met in the 1980s. They were introduced to one another by Grace Paley at Naomi's poetry reading, and they're now married and living together in New York City, where they, like so many folks, are confined to their apartment. The confinement doesn't bother them, they say, as they listen to an album of spirituals. They worry more for all that is being lost and for the rest of their generation than they do for themselves. They lean in close to one another. And in this article, one of the things that I love most is this line you see up on your screen, where the author says, throughout their lives, Naomi and Eva have exhibited a kind of fearlessness, ably nurtured by misfortune. A kind of fearlessness, ably nurtured by misfortune. I know we don't know what this time will mean for all of us yet, but I do hope that we will grow in fearlessness, nurtured by this misfortune. This article in the New York Times about these two women, it closes with the ending lines of a poem that Naomi wrote some time ago called Ring Song. And in it, she talks about how life pings back and forth between joy and pain, that this is the way it is. I've been so heartened by hearing that, by hearing the story of these two women, because for me, these last few weeks, I have been pinging what feels like wildly between gratitude and grief and grief and back again. My feelings are all over the map, and I've come to accept that that is actually a normal response to this very abnormal time. Back and forth from grief to gratitude, moment to moment to moment. Because it's true, right? Each day we are grieving on the micro and the macro level. Individually, each of us continues to grieve new losses. We continue to miss seeing our friends at school and at work. We continue to miss being able to celebrate or mark milestones together. Many of us are living with economic insecurity. We're losing our jobs, or we're afraid of losing our jobs. We're working too much or too little, as Reverend Ruth said. And when we are struggling, or our loved ones are struggling, many of us are not able to be there with them. And that is hurting our hearts. We're having all these experiences on the individual level, on the micro level. And then there's the macro level, as we've named before, this global collective grief and grieving we are feeling, this growing acknowledgement that things are not going to go back to the way they were. For some, this is grief. For some, this is gratitude. The way things were was not all good, but it is also hard to let go of what we know and what was. So we go back and forth between grief and gratitude, beginning to acknowledge that this idea of returning back to the way things were, it's just not going to happen. So this realization is coming to us in different ways for each of us. For some of us, the virus is revealing what has always been true, the ways that we are interdependent and interconnected. Each and every one of us always have been, always will be. For some of us, the virus is showing again the truth that we already know, that those who have been pushed to the margins, that those who have fewer economic resources or who have been deemed as less than by society's rules are bearing the brunt of this pandemic, just as they have of every difficulty through all times. For some of us, we are finally seeing that our government is reacting and starting to create the rules that maybe we knew needed to be there for some time, extending social distancing through the month of April, at least. We've been seeing the news that our parks and our beaches are going to be closed in Minneapolis this summer. And for some of us, that reality really brings this home. We know that thousands and probably hundreds of thousands of lives will be lost. So many of us have been in a state of shock over these past few weeks with this new reality just beginning to sink in. So I think the truth is that we are in a marathon, not a sprint. That's what we're beginning to know. Now, if you know me, you know I'm not a distance runner by any stretch of the imagination. You're much more likely to find me walking for long periods of time, hanging out with my dogs or my kids, maybe doing some quiet yoga at home. But even as someone who is not a distance runner, this analogy works for me. We're in the midst of a marathon, not a sprint, and we need to adjust accordingly. So writer Aisha Ahmad, a professor who's lived through a variety of crises around the world, puts it this way. She says, understand that this is a marathon. If you sprint at the beginning, you will vomit on your shoes by the end of the first month. Don't do it. You need to emotionally prepare, she says, for this crisis to continue for 12 to 18 months, followed by a slow recovery. If it ends sooner, she says, be pleasantly surprised. Right now, work toward establishing your serenity, productivity, and wellness under sustained disaster conditions. This is what she says to us. Now, in some ways, this is the last thing I want to hear. I don't want to vomit all over my shoes. No, although it certainly has felt like that many days this past month. I need to know, though, that we are in this for the long haul. I need to know that there is a way through, too. Other people have lived through times like this before, and they have made it to the other side. And there are things that they can teach to us. The author, Aisha Ahmad, goes on to say that there are 3 stages to adapting to what she calls sustained disaster conditions. This will tell you where to find the article, and also tells you about the 3 stages of adapting to this new reality. Now, I'll summarize for you here. Stage 1, as she said, is all about security. This is the time when you gather up your resources and do your best to ensure that you and your loved ones are safe. You may have experienced this yourself over the last several weeks or seen it in others. It's the time when you work to bring your children home from across the country or around the world. It's the time when parents move in with their children, when people gather food and, yes, toilet paper, and when people who are at higher risk have established greater precautions and perimeters around themselves. I think in some ways, many of us are still in this stage. And my guess is we'll actually be pinging back and forth between all these stages the whole time we're in this. So stage 2 involves a mental shift. It is the acceptance that we are, in fact, in this for the long haul and beginning to act accordingly. I saw a friend of mine make this mental shift earlier this week when she had her kids put away their backpacks and instead pull out baskets and fill them with the school supplies that they were going to need to be able to work from home for the remainder of the year. That was a mental shift. Now, stage 3 is probably the place we all want to be in already, at least I do. Ahmad calls it embracing a new normal. On the other side of your mental shift, she says, your wonderful, creative, resilient brain will be there waiting for you. When we move out of denial and accept the new normal that is unfolding, we find ourselves there waiting for ourselves, and we can thrive, even as we are living with fear and grief on the micro and the macro, the individual and the collective level. Now, I don't know about you, but I would really like to be living in stage 3 already. In fact, I'd like to live in stage 3 all the time. You know, that place where my creativity and resilience and my meaning-making self can really thrive. I love being in that zone. It feels way better than looking for security and survival or having to make all of these adjustments. But here's the thing. I know I'm not in stage 3 all the time now. In fact, I still have plenty of work to do to get there. And I suspect that's true for all of us. So I go back to the words of Tricia Hersey. You might remember that I talked about her back before all this started, my last in-person sermon. Do you remember that? Feels like a year ago, when I told you about the NAP Bishop and the NAP Ministry, one of my favorite resources. So Tricia Hersey, who is a Black poet and activist and author and self-proclaimed NAP Bishop, says this is where we're at. She says, I've noticed this tendency in our culture to skip steps during trauma. We jump right to getting over it immediately, leaving no space for the precious ritual of grief, rest, and lament. In our minds, there's no time for stopping to process, even in a global pandemic that is literally killing thousands. I've heard very little, she says, about the lives of the people who are now gone. And instead, I've found myself overwhelmed with 10,000 streaming videos encouraging me to work out, sing, build a treehouse, bake bread, teach math to kids, play an instrument, go to church, and everything else under the sun. We want to remain in the way it always was, she says, super productive and focused on doing, even when the systems around us are failing and slowing down. I resonate with this. I resonate with this so much. We want to skip the steps, right? Jump past the pain and discomfort to some better version of reality where the crisis draws out the best in us all the time. That's where I want to live. But I know that isn't true. That isn't where we are right now. It's not where I am. I do absolutely trust that we will rise, just like we always do, that creative, resilient part of ourselves, that meaning-making part of ourselves that can lean toward love, even in the hardest times, it is there in us. And it is showing up in moments already. But it is not all that is there. There is also this drive for security, this need to make the mental shift, this need to slow down, to grieve, to rest, and lament. That is what we need. This is a time of immense loss. It's a time of adjustment and acceptance. Harm is happening to us, to each of us through this experience. Of course, it is happening disproportionately, as it always had, to people who are pushed to the margins. But harm is happening to us all. This is the truth of where we are right now, of what we are living in, and we will need these rituals of grief and lament and rest if we are to move through these stages, right? The stages of security, of the mental shift, and then adjusting to this new reality that we live in. We're going to do this by pinging back and forth from grief to gratitude to grief to gratitude, and all of it all over again. I know for myself that I am taking great comfort in knowing that we are not the first and we will not be the last people to live through great loss and great change and find our way through to the other side. Just this week, in the span of a week of days, right? Yesterday was the 52nd anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. This week, we'll move into the Jewish ritual of Passover, where the Jewish people remember their escape from slavery and the 40 years spent wandering in the desert. Today, for Christians, they are recognizing Palm Sunday, remembering this as the day when Jesus walked straight into what he knew would be his betrayal and torture and death. In each of these cases, the people I'm talking about knew pain and disappointment and loss, and they moved forward with love and hope anyway. They imagined a day when all would be equal, when all would be embraced as whole and holy, when love would conquer fear and lead us into a life in the beloved community that we long for. Friends, we are not the first, and we will not be the last people to live through times of great loss and great change. We will, I hope, join our lives with the prophets of the past and the present, who let love be their guide even in the hardest of times. Love as our guide. May we learn to love ourselves and each other as we adjust to this new normal, as we search for security, make our mental shifts, and embrace the reality in front of us. May we learn to love ourselves and each other as we learn to grieve and lament and rest, as we ping wildly back and forth between grief and gratitude. And finally, may we allow ourselves to be changed, to become fearless for love, to be changed by this misfortune for the better, learning to lean into love for ourselves and each other with no one left out. May it be so. Amen. We lean into love. That is who we are, and that is what we are about. It's what we have been doing for 176 years at First Universalist. We are leaning into love as we give, receive, and grow together. So today, we'll engage in one of the ways we give and receive, one of the ways we lean into love together is by sharing our financial resources with each other and with organizations in the world that make the work of love their work. So this week, our offering is going to be going to Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative. This is one of our faithful action partners that works to support individuals and families who are experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity. Now, some of you know, because you've been a part of it, that many times each year, or several times each year, our congregation hosts a program called Families Moving Forward. With this program, families who are experiencing homelessness come and stay in our church building. We provide a safe place, welcoming hospitality, meals, companionship, and support during those weeks when the families are here in our building. Now, in this time of crisis with the virus that continues to move through our communities, the families who are part of Families Moving Forward are being housed in a hotel. Now, you can imagine that this comes at a much greater expense to Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative, costing them $5,000 each week just for the housing portion. And then congregations like ours continue to support them by providing meals for breakfast and for dinner. So I'm happy to say that we have already repurposed the money that we set aside for our gathering in gratitude, which in the past has been an opportunity for our church community to come together and share a meal and celebrate the end of our annual giving drive. But instead this year, we've taken that money and we're going to use it to help purchase the meals to support families moving forward. And we still have this cost of the hotel rooms. So I invite you to give as generously as you're able, if this is a time when you can share of your financial resources to support the important work of Beacon Interfaith Housing Collaborative. Now, you saw up there all the ways to give, right? Text to give, Cash App, website. You can also old school mail a check to the church. We are collecting the mail. So just send a check on into the church with Beacon in the memo line. Now, I also want to remind you that we are here for each other. If there are things that you need, whether it's emotional and spiritual support or practical needs, if you are in a time where you need to receive some financial resources, thanks to the generosity of this community, we have those to share. Please let the ministers or staff know about your needs so that we can be there for you in this time too. Now, I will just put in one reminder that we are still in the midst of our annual giving drive here at church. Our annual giving drive is where we know from you what you intend to give to the church during our next fiscal year, which begins on July 1st. Now, I know this is a time of uncertainty for so many of you and for so many folks in our community. And I also know that the church is more important than ever, offering up a sense of connection, grounding, and support, not just to our church members and friends, but to our entire larger community. If you are able to let us know your best estimate of what you will be able to give in the upcoming fiscal year that starts July 1st, that will be so helpful to us as we plan our budget for the year. As you've heard me say before, our primary source of income is your gifts, and our primary expense is paying for our staff, our salaries and benefits. So during this time, we need all of us, every one of our staff, every one of us as volunteers and members of this church, to be caring for one another. Please let us know about your gift if you're able. You can do that through our website, or you can email Chelsea Birch directly, who is our finance assistant, at chelsea@firstuniv.org. So I want to remind you too that there are other ways to stay connected today and throughout the week. You can join us for smaller gatherings for coffee hour right after the service with Reverend Karen. If you are a 10th to 12th grader, please come back and join us for senior high youth group. If you have kiddos who are birthed through first grade, please join Seth at 12:30 for young family story time. If you are Black, Indigenous, or person of color and a youth, please come on back for our BIPOC youth group today. And of course, there's always worship on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock and a variety of other gatherings for children and adults, for families, and for folks from a variety of different groups. We want to stay connected to you. It's important more than ever right now. So your ministers and staff are here for you, even if we aren't there in person. We're available over the phone, over email, over Zoom, over FaceTime, all kinds of ways. We want to be with you in this challenging time for all of us. We want to know that you are connected to this community of care. So I invite you now to join me in our closing words. Maybe you want to reach out your hands to know yourself connected to this community of care. Friends, we are not the first, and we will not be the last to live through a time of great change and great loss. May we be people who lean into love through it all. May it be so. Amen. And please join with me in singing, if you would, Go Now in Peace.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
So friends, before we extinguish our chalice, Reverend Karen, I don't know, is this the time when Aspen and Eden were going to pop in? I don't know if we can see you as we extinguish our chalice, but you know, I'll take a little bit of joy.
It was going to be the first day probably that Eden was going to come to church, everybody. So I think she's ready to make her debut right now. She's getting ready to come on in. And here's Aspen saying hello.
Hi.
And here is
Eden.
Eden, Lord Hutt Haran. Say hello, Eden. Yay, baby. Yep, there she is. Go down in peace. Take a little love with you. We call her Squish.
Because she's a squishy baby.
Take care, everybody.
That's okay.
Oh, thank you for the love. So friends, if you'd like,
Hey,
you
Eden.
can sign out in the chat box by sharing I Carry the Flame. It's been so good to be together.